Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House, as I say every show. Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
Hello, Sandy. Happy Easter to you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I pretty much forgot.
Uh,
It is one of those things called a holiday. A holiday. And, well, welcome everybody in the chat. There's a lot of people here. All of our favorites, our good friends, Jen. So, what's going on with you?
well, we've got a great show lined up for everybody today. And I would say that today is kind of like a little bit of a sobering day because there's loss. There's your loss that you've had with your cousin, whom you're going to give a remembrance, and
Yeah.
also the loss of one of our great visionaries, great Arctic researcher, Dr. David Barber, has passed. So we're going to pay remembrance to him. And we also have an article from the AP News, Climate Toll on Arctic Bases, Sunken Runways and Damaged Roads. So we're going to take a look at some of the infrastructure that's falling apart in the Arctic.
Yeah,
Not good.
unfortunately.
Not good. And then we have a couple of articles, both from Barents Observer, that amazing journal periodical. One is New Sanctions Deal Fatal Blow to Russia's Arctic LNG. Russia intended to become world leader in liquefied natural gas. The
Yeah.
war against Ukraine has torpedoed plans. No pun intended. And
Torpedoed the
then
plans.
torpedoed the plans, right?
Yeah.
And then we have another one from the Barents Observer. This one actually written by our good friend Thomas Nilsson. Arctic projects must not be postponed because of sanctions Putin orders. We
This
all
is
have the
interesting.
resources and all opportunities to quickly find alternative solutions, Putin told the participants of the meeting on the development of the Arctic zone.
Yep.
And then we're going to end up with, methane's making it big time. Guess what, guys? This is from Newsweek. This is from Newsweek
Yep.
magazine.
News.
Methane feedback loop beyond humans' ability to control may
Wow.
have begun.
Mm,
Noah.
mm, mm.
Now, that'll be an interesting article. So there we go,
Oh
Sandy. We've got
no.
a great
Mm-hmm.
lineup today.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just going to start out really quickly. It was my cousin
All
that
right.
passed. And the reason why it's significant is, first of all, it was a shock. I mean, he was 73. He was in good shape, but the significance is that Jonathan was married to my cousin, actually, right? In 2016, he had been a lawyer. He had been an appellate judge. I mean, he was a really brilliant guy. But around 2016, he must have retired because he started sending me articles on everything. He sent articles on all kinds of stuff. And guess what? He was like my silent editor of Environmental Coffee House, the Facebook page, because he made my life easier. My cousin's husband, wonderful guy. It is a shock to everybody. It was a shock to me. And I feel like it's weird because Jonathan, wherever you are, he had every single day in stuff in that chat, that Facebook chat. Every day he sent me stuff. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. But the whole point is, I feel really sad for his family, for his daughter, for his kids, the grandkids. But I feel sorry for myself because I'm going to miss him. And that sounds really selfish, but it's going to be weird because he was a real big help. So that's my story on Jonathan, and I won't go into any of the real personal stuff. But it was he's just a good person, a good
Mhm.
intelligent person who gave a shit and knew we were fucked. Oops, sorry, but kinda, you know.
Mhm.
And there we go. And I see everybody's joining. So we're gonna go from my cousin to we're gonna talk about Dr. Barber, and then we're gonna play a video. So let's look at the article and check it out. It's from the University of Manitoba, mourning the loss of this visionary Arctic researcher, Dr. David Barber, who I heard of a long time ago, but never really, I saw the TED Talk, I saw the TED Talk, but maybe a lot of you did not. And it's really a wonderful TED Talk. He was one of Canada's most influential and accomplished Arctic researchers. He was a distinguished professor at founding director of the Center for Earth Observation Science, CEOS, and associate dean of research of the Clayton H. Riddell Faculty of Environment, Earth Resources. He also held a research chair in Arctic system science and climate change. And I talked to Jim, Jennifer, and I believe that he met him a couple of
Oh, yeah?
times at events.
Oh.
If he joins the chat, we can ask him. He was a global leader, and he wasn't one of those global leaders that wanted to be like Dr. Mann. Dr. Barber wasn't one of those guys that, wanted to be in the news all the time. He just loved his work. And he is best known for his work on snow, over sea ice, and application of satellite technologies for their characterization. Most notably, he had a talented ability to see links between the ocean ice and atmosphere across scales and connections with people and habitat. So, coupled with his incredible drive and perseverance, he was instrumental in development of many of the large international multidisciplinary networks for Arctic research, including the Network of Centers of Excellence, ArcticNet, the Canadian Arctic Shelf Exchange, which is CASES, the International Polar Year Circumpolar Flaw Lead Study, and more recently, the Hudson Bay System Study. So his dedication helped secure major Arctic research infrastructure, such as the Canadian icebreaker, the Amundsen, which I believe was the icebreaker that just went and discovered Shackleton's ship underwater. I believe that's the one. I think. I'm pretty sure, unless that was one. And the Churchill Marine Observatory. His tireless work has helped to place Canada at the forefront. So he was amazing. He was a gifted speaker. He could express complex scientific ideas into terms that policymakers and media and the public could easily understand. So it was his ability that not only led to signature outreach programs, including schools on board an expedition Churchill, gateway to Arctic research, but also to fostering strong university industry partnerships, most notably with Manitoba Hydro. So he was a pretty wonderful guy, and his ability and contributions, they've been recognized with the highest awards and distinctions. So this guy was the guy, the guy of Arctic, and the guy nobody heard of, but that really paved the way. So, according to his colleagues at the Riddell Faculty of Environment, Earth and Resources, quote, David was a visionary researcher with a passion for the Arctic, a scholar with an entrepreneurial spirit, and a generous mentor and friend. Despite his numerous professional accomplishments, David was first and foremost, he was a family guy. He touched the lives of countless people, and he will be missed greatly. Our thoughts and condolences are with his family and with all that knew him. He's survived by his wife and 3 children, and a step grandson and a grandson. And so isn't that moving as hell? So guys,
Yeah.
what I decided to do, I made a little video. It's not short, but it's really good. And for those of you that may be newer with us, that have never really understood a lot about the Arctic, this video is for you. And for those of you who have been with us a long time and understand so much about the Arctic, this is for you. It doesn't matter who you are. this is for you. So we're going to start it out. And guys, I hope you have the popcorn because it's good. And there you go.
Pretty weird, eh? When I go to a cocktail party and I tell people what I do, they kind of run away from me usually. The idea is that what you're seeing in that animation is the northern hemisphere of your planet Earth, where you live. It's covered with an ocean, but on top of that ocean is a sea ice cover. The sea ice cover is this thing that's moving here that looks like it's alive. And what you're seeing is a one-day time step of what the ice cover looks like in the northern hemisphere looking down at the pole. There's Greenland here, Canadian Arctic Islands here, Alaska, Russia. And what happens is the ice shrinks back in the summertime as the sunlight returns to the Arctic, and that causes the sea ice cover to shrink. It shrinks back to a minimum extent, and what you see on this plot over here is what's been happening with that summer minimum extent each year. So when I started my research work in the Arctic, I was starting right back over here. I'm getting to be an old guy now. And there wasn't much happening, really. It wasn't no big changes going on in the sea ice cover. We never really thought that sea ice would become sort of a fundamental characteristic of our international discourse about global warming and the fact that our planet is warming at a global scale. But in fact, that's what's happened. So as we see this summer ice cover shrinking, we're seeing this kind of rate of decrease right here, and we're going to have at some point in the near future no ice in the northern hemisphere in summer. Now that's a very major change that's happened on our planet system. And I work with a whole bunch of scientists from all around the world that study this, and we study the sea ice itself. We also study the connections with glacial ice and the land and all those kind of things. But when you look at what's happening to the sea ice cover, this change that we have, this reduction that you see there, we found recently that this is significant over at least the last 1,450 years. So that includes the last medieval warm period. It includes the cold periods before that. It includes right up to before the Industrial Revolution. So in fact, what we're seeing in the Arctic right now is unique to our time scale of what we're talking about on the planet. To do this work, we have a whole bunch of tools. One of our largest and most visible tools is the research icebreaker, the Amundsen. And the Amundsen is a ship that will hold 40 scientists, and it holds 40 crew members, and we can deploy to the Arctic anywhere in the Arctic for any amount of time. So we've overwintered now twice in the high Arctic, and we're studying everything in this system. So we study everything from the bottom of the ocean to the top of the atmosphere in the physical world, everything from viruses to whales in the biological world, and all the connections between those. This takes a lot of people. So the networks are not just here at the University of Manitoba, but we have a national network called ArcticNet, which includes Laval University and many other universities across the country. We also have an international network, which includes universities around the world that study the Arctic. We're very proud of the fact that our research icebreaker was highlighted on the back of your $50 bill. So if any of you would like me to sign the $50 bill you have in your pocket, I'd be happy to do that for you. Now, I could talk for a long time about this. I write books about these kind of things, but I wanted to just highlight a few key things that are happening. And these are things that we were surprised about. So I'm a guy that spent 30 years now working in the Arctic, and this stuff is surprising me. So I thought I'd just sort of put those together as 7 surprises, if you will. First one is multi-year sea ice is being replaced with very thin first-year sea ice. So multi-year sea ice, if you look up at the ceiling, is thicker than what you see here to the ceiling. It's sort of 5 to 10 meters thick. It's really, really thick, really, really hard. When I started working in the Arctic, it was all over the place. Now there's only 12% of the Arctic left with that kind of ice in it, and it's being replaced with this young stuff. And this young stuff is very saline. It's very salty. Remember, it's an ocean that this ice forms on. And what happens is you get these pretty little frost flowers. So that little image you see is a delicate little crystal flower that grows up out of the ice. Very saline. If you were to taste it, you'd spit it out right away because it's 100 parts per thousand salty, like really, really salty. The other thing is we're finding crystals in the ice itself called icaite, which is associated with how CO2 moves through the system. So up until just recently, we thought the ocean was capped by this ice cover, and that CO2 couldn't move between the ocean and the atmosphere. CO2 is the big problem, right? This is what's causing our planet to warm, and we thought that it was decoupled in the Arctic, but we're finding, in fact, it's not. This young sea ice actually plays an active role in exchanging carbon dioxide with the surface. There are similar processes going on with bromine, mercury, and they're very reactive with the atmosphere. So we're very concerned about what these young ice types mean for the evolution of the Arctic atmosphere. Snow on sea ice is also very important. Snow falls on the sea ice. When it falls on ice that's already there, it forms a thick blanket. It insulates that ice so the ice can't grow as thick as it would have otherwise. If it falls in the open ocean, it does absolutely nothing at all. So what that's doing is it's protecting this multi-year sea ice from growing too thick, which means that it gets thinner and thinner each year because the snow cover doesn't allow it to grow as thick as it used to be. Of course, this is affecting the animals that live in this environment, and in particular polar bears. You've probably heard in the media that, polar bears, the sea ice is disappearing. This is an important habitat for the polar bear, so what's going to happen with our polar bears? We have lots of them here in Manitoba. We have lots of them in Canada. Well, unfortunately, it's not as simple and straightforward as reduction in sea ice means reduction in polar bear habitat. It's much more complicated than that. Multi-year sea ice, polar bears can't dig into it. They can't get to the seals. The seals don't dig into that kind of ice, so it's not a preferred habitat. The first-year ice that is replacing the multi-year sea ice is the preferred habitat. So in some places, the habitat for polar bears is actually improving, and in other places, it's getting worse. The big problem is when you remove all the sea ice and you have open water. In those areas, the length of that open water is really important because the polar bears have to go on land and have to be able to forage on the sea ice. They have to wait for it to happen in the fall. When you look at the rest of the ecosystem in the Arctic, a good way to think about it is that the sea ice acts like the trees in a tropical rainforest. If you're sitting in your seat right now and you think, okay, if we clear cut all the tropical rainforest trees, we can expect there to be an impact on everything in the tropical ecosystem, right? Well, sea ice plays exactly the same role. If you get rid of all the sea ice, it changes the light environment and the heat environment, which affects everything that lives in the ocean because the ocean has evolved to take advantage of the timing and presence of the sea ice. So in fact, our research work shows that the change in sea ice is affecting everything in the marine system, right from the very smallest viruses and bacteria all the way up through the food chain to polar bears, ring seals, those kinds of things. We haven't found anything yet that isn't. Another thing we're finding about the ecosystem is that invasive species are becoming a key thing in the Arctic. So on the Atlantic side of the Arctic, we're getting species moving north and displacing the Arctic species. Same's happening on the Pacific side. The other thing that we're finding about the Arctic is that it is not what it necessarily appears to be from space. So the Arctic is really hard to get to, right? It's not, probably very few of you have been in the high Arctic in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. It's very difficult to get there. And we rely on space to tell us what's going on. That animation at the beginning of my presentation was a series of space-borne satellites that give us that kind of animated picture of what's going on. Well, in fact, in 2009, we had our research icebreaker down here, and we went up this line that you see right here in this figure, and all of these colors of red and darks, those all should be multi-year thick sea ice. And in 2009, what we found was it wasn't. It was a form of rotten sea ice. It was so rotten, in fact, that the ship that we have does 13.5 knots in open water, and we were able to traverse that ice at 13 knots, so almost the same speed as in perfectly open water. Yet the satellites all thought it was very thick multi-year sea ice because that's what it had always traditionally been. The Chinese took their research icebreaker from China and came up this way, thought they would get stopped somewhere around here, and they were able to go all the way to the pole in 2010. The Germans in 2011 and 2012 had expeditions to the North Pole. They couldn't find ice solid enough to put crews out on in the summer. They were wanting to put scientific instruments out. We couldn't find ice that was thick enough to do that. So this rotten ice now is pervasive in the summertime. So in the months of August and September, most of the Central Arctic is this very heavily decayed ice, which we call rotten ice. Now, of course, that has a dramatic effect on transportation. So the world is now looking at transportation corridors across the pole. It's just like when you fly. If you take the Northern Circle route, it's way shorter than if you go around the bulge of the planet on the equator. So all the world's economies are looking at the cost savings that would be from taking a tanker from China to Europe, for instance, either through the Northern Sea route or across the pole route, or even the Northwest Passage route through northern Canada. One of the things that's a bit paradoxical about this reduction in sea ice is that we're actually seeing an increase in ice hazards. Well, how does that make sense? I mean, the ice is decreasing. Doesn't that mean that it should be less hazardous? Well, in fact, it doesn't seem to be the case. And this was a surprise to us. Like, this video is from the helicopter on board our icebreaker, and we're landing just in front of that little nose cone that you see out there. We're going to land on a piece of tabular iceberg that comes from shore. It was attached to a glacial piece of ice, which then broke off, went into the marine system, and is now encapsulated with the motion of the sea ice. That thing is 120 meters thick. You cannot break it with an icebreaker. You can't, you just have to get out of its way. If it's coming towards you, you can't have a drill ship there. You can't do any of those kind of things. The other thing that was surprising to us is just how thick some of the multi-year ice is. So this picture here I took from a little, we call them skippy boats. They're like a Florida Everglades boat. We use them to go around in the ice cover nearby the ship. And that ice cover there was typical multi-year sea ice, but it was 30 meters thick because the ice is moving very quickly. It piles up on itself. When it piles up on itself, it can actually get thicker in very localized areas in the Arctic. And so this was a big surprise to us as well. This idea of the ice being able to move faster is also a big hazard. So when you think about the Arctic Basin, if you think of that animation I showed you, just think about filling it up with styrofoam and then blowing a wind over top of the styrofoam. If it's full of styrofoam, it's not going to blow around very much. But if you reduce how much styrofoam is in there, take a bunch of pieces out, blow the same wind across it, and that styrofoam is going to go like crazy. And that's exactly what's happening in the Arctic. So ice hazards are an issue of if you see that big tabular iceberg coming to you and you're in a drill ship, you need X number of hours to deconnect that drill ship and get it out of the way, because if you don't, it's just going to wipe it out. So that's the problem with these ice hazards. The last one I wanted to tell you about is a paradoxical thing that is happening right now with our climate system. And this is very much a hypothesis that we're working on. There's no conclusions here, it's just what we're working towards understanding. And that is, as we reduce the amount of ice cover over the pole, we open the ocean, and the ocean loses its heat to the atmosphere, and that causes the atmosphere to have a lower pressure value than it would normally have. The diagram on your left up here, this one here, shows what the polar vortex should look like. If you listened to media last winter, you would have heard this name come up a lot on the media. The polar vortex is causing this cold weather in southern Canada. Well, what's happening is traditionally this polar vortex would keep the cold air encapsulated in the Arctic. This is what the polar vortex has been starting to look like over here. It's all broken up. And the reason it's broken up is there's so much more heat coming out of the ocean into the atmosphere. So it isn't able to retain this cold air over top of the poles. And the circulation that's associated with this is also changing. So you'll see on some of the diagrams when you see a meteorologist talking about how loopy the jet stream is. Well, this jet stream is looping much further down over the continents now, bringing this cold air down over the continents, both our side of the planet and the other side of the planet. And there's pretty good evidence starting to mount now that it is related to the ongoing reduction of sea ice cover in the northern hemisphere. So again, it's a paradoxical thing with a warming climate to get colder temperatures at lower latitudes of our planet. So just in summary, to sort of recapitulate some of these things, this idea of a saltier ice surface is something we're very concerned about because it leads to UV increase in these surfaces because of the reduction of ozone. It also changes how mercury moves through the system, and it changes how CO2 moves through the system. So for instance, we don't even know for sure whether the Arctic Ocean is going to become an overall source or a sink for CO2. That's a pretty important thing because the Arctic Ocean is very big, and from a planetary perspective, that's very important. The second one, snow, is a very big complicating factor.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Let me get back on the video. Hang on a second, guys. Just a minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. You know, that's funny. 1 minute. I went through this wasn't even from, okay, hang on. We should be able to come back. I'm going to get us back. We should be able to come back. All right. The thing was, it wasn't even on TED Talk. It was a different place. It took a long time. All right, let's see here. How do I get us back? Hang on. If I start a new stream, hang on, I'll let you know. Wow, I didn't even take it from them. I was watching through Facebook, and Facebook didn't censor it. All right, it says we are live, so why isn't it coming back on? Let me see if we reboot, if it'll come back on. Nope. All right, let me get another, they needed a break. Let me get another stream, hang on. We'll just get a YouTube one. It'll take us just me a second, okay? All right, hang on. They're still hanging with us. We'll get a new stream going. Oh, I thought I'd circumvent that, Jen. You know that, right? YouTube. Because this other channel, can you hear me? Oh, wait, let's see what it says. Okay. Stream unavailable. Okay, creating a new stream. creating a new one. Oh, wait. I think we might come back. Okay, we're back. I didn't have to. We're back. All right. We're back. We're back. All right, let me tell you what happened. I took the. Yeah, we're back. Aren't we back on? I've got it. We're back. Go out and come back in. Go out and come back in. I can't hear Jennifer. I can't hear you. She got to put her thing on. You
Yeah.
back, Jen?
Yeah,
All right.
good. Yeah.
So this is what
Everything's
happened.
good.
I took this not from TED Talk. I took it from another channel that took it from TED Talk, and so I have no idea. But that's okay. We saw enough, and we're still going to say R.I.P. You know,
Yeah.
and I don't think I'm not monetized. So it just took a couple of minutes to stop it. That's all. So here we are.
see.
We're back. We're back. Yay! Oh, it's always so
Yay.
exciting being live.
I
So
know.
exciting. It's so exciting being live.
It's
Yeah.
exciting every single show. You never
No.
know what's going to happen.
And Mila just said she didn't even have to go back and come in. So we just had to wait. And it's funny because I was watching the Facebook stream because I'm trying to see, is it worth it for me to multi-stream to Facebook? I've been, back and forth for so long. And I didn't know that it went off on YouTube until I saw the chat saying, something's going on. So I went back on YouTube. All right. So anyway, Lisa says he scared you enough as it was. That was 2014. And what I was going to ask Jennifer is if she had
Yes.
any comments, because since that was 2014 and we have all these years since then, why don't you
Yes.
comment on it, Jennifer?
Well, actually, it was in 2014 that I first became aware that the jet stream was really splitting apart and why it was splitting apart and all the mechanics. And I dove into it actually a couple of years earlier. But by 2014, I was bubbling, right? And that was the year that I released the Arctic Methane Monsters Rapid Rise. That was very, very similar to what he was talking about. So we were all on the same wavelength in 2014. That's when things really began to go haywire and everybody became very cognizant of the jet stream and the irregularity of the jet stream, right?
Yes.
And since then, the jet stream's gotten even weirder. And there's been many, many instances where it's fully crossed the equator and been interacting with the southern jet stream. And things have gotten so crazy now, it's almost like it's too much even to talk about. But there was such an intensity in 2014, I remember for myself, when all of this information was coalescing in my brain in this crisis of realization. And
You
that's
were
really
earlier
what I
than
call
me.
it. Yeah.
You were
Crisis of
earlier than
realization.
me. Definitely. I mean, I remember seeing this, but then it went out of my mind. I didn't get to anywhere. I might say 2017. You had your epiphany because you flew over it and saw it.
In 2012, I flew over Greenland, and that was it. And I flew over it at the lowest when the whole thing was melted on top. If you'll excuse me, it was August of 2012, August, September, right? That time period. And I was coming back from England, flew over Greenland. It was a complete mess. It really shook me up because it was just like all breaking down. And that definitely was very instrumental in my kind of awakening crisis,
Well, and then here we are.
Crisis
Here we
of
are.
awakening. Here we are today.
We're in a crisis of awakening, but you know what? You come out from the other side when you have acceptance and you understand what's happening. You understand.
Yeah.
And that's not easy. People will say, well, how do you deal with it? And I can sometimes, I'll tell you the truth, I can deal with the climate crisis because I'm understanding better than politics. I mean, right now I'm really angry because There is a
Right.
Republican gubernatorial idiot that's running in New York who made a tweet today that basically he wants to frack the shit out of where I live. So I'm done. I mean, I'm my activism hat's going to be on. We're going to get in touch with all the same people that were involved in the Northern Access Pipeline, and we're going to make sure this guy does not win. And that's going to be a hard choice because we may have to back the one that I don't like, the neoliberal corporate Democrat who actually will keep it out. That was Cuomo's redeeming quality, was that he kept fracking out of our southern tier. So that's
Yeah.
so my mood today, and at least the stream came back though. I'm really glad. Oh shit. Well, so guys, we have more to move on to. And now keep in mind that what we move on to is the mainstream media, and then, of course, the Barron's Observer, which I don't know, maybe Thomas Nilsson, is he seen as mainstream, Jen, at all?
I mean, they're a very small alternative, kind of boutique periodical, way up there in the very
Yeah.
northern tip of Norway, but I
Yeah.
think they're just brilliant, really
Yeah.
brilliant.
Well, yeah. I mean, because he knows what's going on up there. All right.
Yeah.
Let me fix this, and you want to take it away on this one? This is the
Oh, okay,
AP.
sure.
The AP. I
Yeah.
mean, we're going through what are the mainstream? What's the mainstream media showing people, basically?
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Climate toll on Arctic bases, sunken runways, damaged roads. So
Lovely.
let's take a look and see what we've got here.
Yeah.
U.S. military bases in the Arctic and subarctic are failing to prepare their installations for long term climate change as required, even though soaring temperatures and melting ice already are cracking base runways and roads and worsening floods risks up north. The Pentagon's watchdog office said Friday. The report from the Inspector General of the Department of Defense provides a rare bit of public stock taking of the military's state of readiness or lack of readiness for worsening weather of a
Military.
warming Earth. The U.S. military has
I'm
formally
sorry.
recognized. No, I mean,
It's
barf
pathetic
away.
world we live in.
Barf,
It's
barf
pathetic.
away, baby.
Ugh.
It's
Yeah.
pathetic. It's
Of
pathetic,
course.
I tell you.
There's our editorializing about the military, but we'll keep going because this is what people are seeing. So,
Right. Okay. So the U.S. military has formally recognized climate change as a threat. Here, let me get back to where I was. I had to make my thing smaller. As a threat to national security. That's in part because of the impact that intensifying floods, wildfires, extreme heat, and other natural disasters are having and will have on U.S. installations and troops around the world. Increasing hurricanes, flooding, storms, and wildfires in recent years have caused billions of dollars in damage to Florida's Tyndall Air Force Base, Nebraska's Offutt Air Force Base, and other U.S. military installations, interrupted training and other operations. For years, laws, presidential orders, and Pentagon rules have mandated that the military start planning and work so that its installations, warships, warplanes, and troops can carry out their missions despite increasing challenging conditions as the use of fossil fuels heats up the earth. So they're just going to
oh,
continue doing more stuff, even though it's harder to do that stuff. They're going to do it more and faster, which heats up the earth
of
even more.
course.
Ugh,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course, of
And get
course.
more funding, just like the
Oh,
fossil fuel
crap.
industry. Let's
Oh,
subsidize
crap.
the fossil fuel industry and the military way more. Yep. Okay.
Oh, crap. While even acknowledging climate change was a career risk for administration officials under former President Donald Trump. Boo. President Joe Biden directed faster, more sweeping action on climate change by the Department of Defense and other agencies as one
Okay.
of his first acts in office.
He did.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Despite Biden's emphasis, inspectors visiting the United States' six northernmost military bases last June and July found none were carrying out the required assessments and planning to prepare their installations and operations against long term climate change. Further, most installation leaders at the six installations we visited in the Arctic and subarctic regions were unfamiliar with military installation resilience planning requirements, processes, and tools. The inspector general report said, well, that's not very good. They're not thinking about
No.
disasters. Very short sighted. Very short sighted. Senior officers told the inspector general's inspection team that their operations lacked the training and funding to start the required work of on hardening their bases. Some saw requirements for that kind of long-term planning as assembling a wish list that would go up against competing priorities, the officers told inspectors. A Pentagon spokesman did not immediately respond to a request for comment Friday.
He
The
didn't.
inspector general, no,
She
he
didn't.
didn't.
Or
No, no,
she
no.
didn't. She didn't.
She
Yeah.
didn't. The inspector general report cited defense officials as saying that the Biden administration has finished or is working on many of the report's recommendations to better incorporate climate preparations at the bases and across military branches, and would increase resources to bases to make that possible. On the bases is Greenland and the other 5, one of the bases is in Greenland and the other 5 in Alaska. Toole Air Base, Joint Base, Elmdorf, Richard Sinclair Space Force Station. These are all the bases. You
Yeah.
don't need to know the name of them, but
The
they're all out there.
basis, baby.
The bases, baby. All right. The Arctic and subarctic are important to U.S. strategic aims in part because of rising tensions and competition with Russia and China, and in part because sharply rising temperatures are melting sea ice and opening up both shipping lanes and access to the region's oil and other resources, increasing interest and traffic in the region. The Defense Department also sees the Arctic is a potential vector for attack on the US homeland, a region where
Oh,
Russia and
yeah.
China are operating more freely, and a strategic corridor for DoD forces between the Indo-Pacific and Europe, the report notes. The inspectors found the kind of problems associated with worsening climate change are already causing trouble at U.S. bases. At, Force, at Fort Wainwright in Alaska, heightened wildfire risks in 2019 interrupted training for 2 Pacific Air Force squadrons, so that one was able to carry out only 59% of the planned training for a period, the report said. Many of the specific discussions of climate risks at the 6 bases were blacked out in the version of the report made public on Friday. But inspectors photographed and described some that included cracked and sunken runways
Oh.
undermined by melting ice,
Oh, wow.
damaging hangars and roads, and a
Happening
collapsed
faster.
rock barrier that had been piled up to hold back floodwaters from a river swollen by glacial melting at Toole in Greenland. Leaders at all 6 bases visited noted that the kind of damage inspectors said. However, officials from 5 of these installations said that they had not begun incorporating future climate risks into their installations planning. They stated that their day-to-day focus was on reacting to immediate problems or reducing risk to existing hazards rather than planning for future hazards. Holy fucking crap.
Oh,
Sandy, these
I
people are
know.
dumb.
No.
Dumb.
I mean, yeah.
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 Failure of the
Yeah.
education
Yeah.
system.
The Arctic is warming 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the world. A March heat wave that hiked Arctic temperatures to 50 degrees, 30 degrees Celsius, higher than normal, stunned scientists. You see, Sandy, once again, they are surprised
Stunned,
and they are stunned. They are
shocked.
stunned and surprised,
They're
shocked, I
shocked.
tell you,
They're
shocked.
shocked.
Right. Of 79 U.S. military installations overall, the Department of Defense says that two-thirds are vulnerable to worsening flooding as climate worsens, and half are vulnerable to increasing drought and wildfire.
Okay, I want to
That's
talk
it.
about this for a minute. I want to talk
Yeah.
about this for a minute, me and you. I want to talk about the fact that this channel reads full articles. Okay. We read the full article. We may moan and groan, but we don't cherry pick to make a point, a position, or anything like that. What we do is report to you what's in this mainstream media, what are other people seeing. We report what other events that are happening. But one of the things I think is really important, and yes, we are who we are, and we grown and we don't like a lot of things, but we're not pulling anybody. We're not we just want to educate. And that's what I
Mhm.
see. I go around the YouTubes and I see a lot of people cherry pick and take out pieces of articles and then they, manipulate the shit. And we're not doing it. We're not going to do that. So there's my little public
Your
service
little
announcement.
your little spiel, your
Yeah, my
public service announcement.
Yes, that's why we will read full articles. And when we don't read a full article, it's because we're just tired. We're not trying to tell you that, you know,
Or the article is super
yeah.
long.
Or, yeah, actually, or way too nerdy, as Jennifer likes to say.
Yeah.
We had the nerd show last week. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything to say to that one, Jen?
Well, at the very last, it's just amazing. They're not planning for the future. They're only just addressing whatever things are happening right now. And then they acknowledge that things are really bad and that the Arctic has gotten really, really, really super warm, and but they still don't want to plan for the future. They just want to react to present
Yeah, that's
situations.
what it doesn't seem like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
All right.
Yes.
Well, we are going to go to the next ones, which is we are going to the Barents Observer. And
Okay.
I think I'll do a little bit on this one. Now, you have to realize now this is from Thomas Nielsen. He's in Norway. And these articles are kind of wild because one segues right into the other. New
Uh-huh.
sanctions deal a fatal blow to Russia's LNG. All right, so the war. Again, we're reading the full article. The EU's fifth round of sanctions against Russia following its attack on Ukraine will hit hard on the country's energy industry. Among the points in the restrictive measures is an export ban on goods such as quantum computers, advanced semiconductors, high end electronics, software, sensitive machinery, and transportation equipment, including in the sanctions, and also that import on the ban on coal. So, according to High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, the sanctions follow the atrocities committed by Russian armed forces in Bucha and other places under Russian occupation. The aim of our sanctions is to stop the reckless, inhumane, and aggressive behavior of the Russian troops and make clear to the decision makers in the Kremlin that their illegal aggression comes at a very heavy cost, Burrell says in a statement. Among the technology and equipment that will be hit by the new sanctions are heat exchanging units, a key component in LNG plants. Novatech and Gazprom, and we've talked about them on this show many times,
Mhm.
Russia's two biggest natural gas companies are fully dependent on Western technology, and they will hardly be able to make it without the heat exchanging units and other equipment manufactured abroad. Novatech, they are applying for technology from German company Linde in its Arctic LNG 2, the grand project now unfolding on the eastern banks of the Ob Bay. Well, according to EU regulations, the ban includes also equipment that already has been contracted and paid for. Western manufacturers will now have to ship goods contracted before the 26th of February to Russia, no later than the 27th of May, newspaper Kommersant reports. So the export ban could ultimately include turbines and other key equipment needed in LNG products. So Russia, they've made attempts to develop domestic technology. However, Novatech's Arctic Cascade technology has not been a success, and the company in early 2022 announced the future projects will be built with Western technology. So Novatech is about to complete, look at that thing. Ugh, the first train of the Arctic LNG, too. According to CEO of Total, Patrick Poyan, the first of three project platforms is 95% completed. And Jennifer, so who says we're getting off fossil fuels anytime soon? I mean,
Not
what
in
kind
Russia,
of,
you're not.
okay. The second platform is 40% completed, while the construction of the third has not yet started, Kommersant reports. Each of the trains will have an annual production capacity of 6.6 million tons. And these platforms are built at the Kola yard near Murmansk, and they will be towed to the production site in Gdańsk in 2023. Look at that. Let me see if I can make that just a little bigger. That thing it's hideous, isn't it? It's
Oh.
hideous. Ugh. The French company owns 10% of it. It also controls a 20% stake in the Yamal LNG. Russia has had great plans for its LNG industry. By year 2035, the country is supposed to become the world's biggest producer with at least 140 million tons per year. According to the Russian Arctic strategy from 2020, a total of 91 million tons of it will be produced in the Arctic. So now Novatech will hardly be able to compete more than the first train of the Arctic LNG 2. Ultimately, it can also run into troubles when acquiring needed spare parts for Jamul LNG, the project that came into production in late 2017. Similarly, the sanctions are likely to hit also the Kola yard outside Murmansk, the place for construction of Project Gravity platforms. Also, the building of ice-class tankers for the project will be affected. So, in the statement, German company Linde says it condemns the invasion of Ukraine and is deeply concerned about the resulting humanitarian crisis. The industrial gas company has already suspended all its business developments activities in Russia. It now also says that it is committed to scaling back its operations by ceasing supply to certain customers and divesting industrial assets to reduce its footprints in the country. So, with the halt in LNG projects, Russia will neither be able to meet its ambiguous targets for the Northern Sea route. According to the country's Arctic strategy, a total of 130 million tons of goods are to be shipped annually on the route by 2035. And by 2024, the volume is to constitute at least 80 million tons. All right. Now, the next one, and then we're going to segue over to this person. And again, it's what's going on is crazy. Jennifer, we're going to we'll tag team this one because they're sanctioned and Russia wants to go full steam ahead with their fossil fuel exploration, everything, right? Okay, fine. And so here we go with what is Vladimir Putin doing. And not for nothing, I watch a couple of different Russian YouTubers. And NKFRZ, he is in the state of Georgia right now, and he's saying nothing's ever going to be the same. And he, in Russia, and he can't even go back. And it's a good channel if you want to listen to a 22-year-old who's telling us about what's happening there, without us having to politicize and editorialize any more than we already are by reading this stuff. So, Jen, why don't you take it away
Mhm.
on what Putin's brain is telling him could be possible in his
Oh, dear
country?
God. No
Mm,
telling what goes on in that twisted gray mass.
no.
Arctic projects must not be postponed because of sanctions Putin orders. So, the president called for maximizing the pace of work on both current and future projects and plans related to the Arctic. Quote, taking to account various kinds of external restrictions and sanction pressure, we need to pay special attention to all projects and plans related to the Arctic, not to postpone them, not to change, but on the contrary, we must respond to attempts to restrain our development, Putin stressed. Much of Russia's oil,
Mush.
gas, and mineral
Is on
mush,
mush.
mush, it's on mush, that's right.
Yeah.
Much of Russia's oil, gas, and mineral resources are extracted in the Arctic. Several of the largest industrial projects under development, like the Arctic LNG 2 and Vostok oil field, depend on shipping along the northern sea route. The region that over the past years has been a top priority for Russian government is now about to face a serious economic setback. Shortly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, private natural gas company Novatek, a major shareholder in both Yamal LNG and the coming Arctic LNG 2, said that developments are in jeopardy as Western sanctions on Russian banks put needed funds on hold. Novatech is fully dependent on both investments and technology from foreign partners, and the company might now ultimately have to halt the development of the Arctic LNG too. As Europe wants to cut Russian energy, shipping to markets in Asia becomes a priority of the Kremlin. The Barents Observer has previously reported about big challenges in Murmansk as wagons and tankers with oil to be reloaded and transported to markets in Europe queue up. Last week's EU decision to curb coal imports from Russia will also have a huge impact, as Murmansk is one of Russia's largest export harbors for coal. You let me when you wanna jump in,
Okay, I'll
yeah?
go if you want to. Do you want to
Okay.
keep going?
Sure, go for it.
Keep going.
In his speech on Wednesday, Putin said the West's refusal to cooperate has provoked an energy crisis that already has hit millions of Europeans. Quote, "For these countries, prices are rising everywhere,
Oh,
and
he feels bad.
inflation is simply going through the roof." Quote, the president said and added that the situation also creates problems for Russia. Putin, however, noted that Russia will find alternatives. Quote, "New windows of opportunity open for us," he said, according to the transcript from the meeting posted by the Kremlin. Putin stressed that the sanctions would strengthen Russia's independence.
Oh,
Quote,
really?
of course,
Hmm.
of course, it creates certain complications for us in the current situation, but we have all the resources and capabilities to quickly find alternative solutions and, in the long term perspective, to even further reinforce our independence from external factors. An extremely important task. Quote. The president said that domestic consumption of oil and gas should increase, stimulating processing of raw materials. Also, Russia aims at increasing supply of energy resources to other regions of the world. Putin said that the responsible ministries and state agencies should now give an extra push to develop Arctic infrastructure like railways, ports, and icebreaker construction.
Lovely.
While criticizing Western states for sanctioning Russia's development plans in the north, the president called for an international cooperation with others, like non Arctic states. Quote, let me emphasize that Russia is open to joint work with all interested partners in the framework of both current and future programs and projects in the Arctic, Putin said. There will be enough work for everyone here, the head of state told his loyal listeners via a video link from the presidential bunker.
Lovely.
Dang.
Well, the whole thing here is, as we try not to be politicized too much, and we look at everything from a we don't like fossil fuels. We don't see how all of this ramping up is going to help anything. We see the hypocrisy. It's pathetic.
Mhm.
All these world leaders, can be pathetic in their own way. Everybody seems to be an vying to be imperialistic and go towards fascism and all that crazy shit. So there, I've said it, but I'm not going to go any further, and we're going to move on. We wanted to bring you what's happening from the Barron's Observer. It kind of gives you a window, a little different window than you get from our mainstream media in the United
Most
States.
definitely.
Yeah. But we're going to move on to methane.
Yeah.
Near and dear to our
Absolutely.
heart.
Near and dear to our heart.
Yes.
So now David Wallace Wells has become a common home name. It's kind of interesting, right? That's David
Yeah.
Wallace Wells in that video. It's a pretty good
Yeah.
little 4-minute video if
Do
you
you
all want
think
to
I can
check that
try?
out later.
Okay. Yeah. I
Well,
won't play it yet.
Sandy, I really don't know.
No, we're 58
You have
minutes.
to-
We're not playing
but
any videos.
no, and we're not going to take any more risks. We're just
No.
going to do our show.
Yeah.
So, methane feedback loop beyond humans' ability to control may have begun, according to NOAA.
Okay.
Close that thing. A methane feedback loop that is beyond humans' ability to control may have begun, scientists with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, have said. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas emitted into the atmosphere from both human activities and natural processes. It is the second biggest contributor to climate change after carbon dioxide. According to NOAA, methane is 25 times more powerful at trapping heat in the atmosphere compared to carbon dioxide. While it remains in the atmosphere for a much shorter time than carbon dioxide, it has a huge impact on the rate of climate change. Research published by NOAA now shows that 2021 saw the largest annual increase in atmospheric methane levels since measurements began in 1983. Jin Lan, a research scientist at NOAA, told Newsweek that after 2006, the majority of methane emissions produced were caused by natural wetlands and man-made emissions. Natural wetlands produce methane when organic matter decays, while man-made emissions are caused by livestock, waste, and landfills.
Look
Oh,
at
look
that
at that
picture.
beautiful methane picture.
Who took
It's
that?
pretty.
It's Getty
So
Images.
pretty.
It's Abraham Link in Alberta, Canada. Frozen at sunset with frozen bubbles of methane. Wow. That's amazing.
It's
I wonder if
pretty.
they touched it up, but it's what
No, I've
it
seen
probably
I've
is.
seen loads and loads and
Oh,
loads of pictures just like this is just what it looks like actually. It's
wow.
not dead,
Beautiful.
not touched up. So those are little pancake methane bubbles just waiting to come out.
Wow.
Okay. It is difficult for scientists to determine which emissions come from which source. However, natural methane production is accelerated by rain and varying temperatures, which climate change is already causing. Lon said that because the Earth's climate is already warming, the methane produced from natural wetlands is only set to increase. This signals the beginning of a feedback loop, an ongoing cycle that cannot be broken. Quote, from natural processes, we know that wetland methane emissions are sensitive to change in precipitation and temperature. Methane production from microbes increases with increase in global temperature, which is driven by long-term greenhouse gas emissions. More atmospheric methane in turn can further warm up the earth. That's the feedback loop we're referring to. In a statement, the NOAA said that this
Okay.
loop could be beyond human capabilities to control. No
You think?
kidding.
You think?
I mean, they've never been able to control it. Now, what do they think they have any
Well,
control is a
I
mystery to
wonder.
me.
Man
Yeah.
made control. What do you think, Jennifer? How does man made control sound for that we have no control? So let's
We have no control.
flush it away. There you go. That gets the environmental coffee house flush of the day.
No
No
kidding.
control. Flush it
No
away.
control. Lon said that in 2020 and 2021, the Earth was in a La Nina phase, a period when the ocean surface cools, subsequently causing lower temperatures. Quote, we typically see more rainfall over terrestrial tropics, i.e., larger wetland areas, during a La Nina year. We know that in 2021, it was the warmest La Nina on record. That's why we are concerned about the possibility of climate
Climate
feedback.
feedback.
No kidding. Quote, unfortunately, we may not be able to know for sure that it is a climate feedback because of the limitations on current observable capability on wetland methane emissions. In other words, they don't know what the fuck's going on. However,
Okay.
Lod said that's what they're actually saying. Lon said that if there is a climate feedback happening, it means the long term warming in global temperatures has already contributed to more greenhouse gas emissions. Quote, that would be an extra challenge for us in combating the impact of climate change. Reducing fossil methane emissions is a straightforward approach to slow down the to revert the growing trend in the atmospheric methane. But given the longevity of CO2 in the atmosphere and the much larger fossil CO2 emissions, we should just we should also take immediate actions to reduce fossil CO2 emissions. Of course, unfortunately, it is difficult to understand and control the natural methane emissions.
That's right.
Boom.
Boom.
While it is hard for scientists to differentiate which emissions come naturally, they estimate that about 30% of the methane emissions are caused by fossil fuel production. These emissions tend to be easier to control with technology, the NOAA said in a statement. Quote, it's going to take a lot of hard work to reverse these trends, and clearly that's not happening. Ariel Stein,
Clearly.
director of NOAA's Global Monitoring Laboratory, said in a statement. So, it is crucial that we continue to sustain integrated and robust monitoring and verification systems to help assess the current state of the atmospheric greenhouse gas burden, as well as determine the effectiveness of future greenhouse gas emission reduction measures. And that is that. And do you know
Yeah.
what was missing in that article?
What was missing, Jennifer?
What
What
was
was
missing
missing?
in that
What
article?
was
They did not
missing?
ever mention the Arctic, not one time.
No, not in that one.
They
No.
mentioned wetlands, they mentioned agriculture, they mentioned fossil fuel methane production, clogging the leaks and so forth, but never once in that whole little article. Maybe they just forgot it. Maybe they don't know about it. I don't think so. I think it's a
Well,
plot. I think it's a plot.
it's a
I do.
plot.
It's a plot. Well, it's actually
Plot.
untruthful because there
Yeah.
are 7 times in the Arctic, the methane hydrate deposits are
Right.
7 times the amount of petroleum that's ever been burned on Earth. I mean, it's like an
Wow.
extraordinary amount. No, it's an extraordinary amount. It's not like a little bit. It's like
No.
gargantuan,
Yeah.
gargantuan amount of methane hydrate in the Arctic just waiting to come out. And for some reason, people think it's not going to happen because it hasn't happened. So I guess if you want to base the future on the past, you're in good shape. However, if you want to base the future on scientific understanding,
Yep.
we're fucked up beyond all recognition,
Well,
you
this
know.
Newsweek article is what mainstream people who reads Newsweek anyway. I mean, I don't know what their who their audience is actually, but it'd be interesting to find out. But that's a mainstream article, so it left out the Arctic and yeah, you're and then who's reading it and who's understanding it and who's even reading it to the end. So are people really getting what they need to learn reality?
It seems like they only covered half truths. You know, they did talk about some things. They did talk about the fact
Okay.
that there are feedbacks within the methane cycle, but they didn't talk about the Arctic. And that's
At
just
least
kind
it's
of
in
like
there. At least the
ignoring the
article.
biggest part of all.
Yeah. At least it's there. You know,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
many
yeah,
years
yeah,
ago were
yeah,
we
yeah,
reading
yeah.
anything from Newsweek? I don't think
No,
we
you're
were.
right. You're absolutely right.
I
This
don't
is
think this
this
were.
it's a big step. It's a big step.
Yeah. Well, anyway, guys, thank you. We are almost sticking to an hour. Perfect. Like and subscribe. Don't forget. Our everything. The show notes are in the show notes. Jennifer, I loved it. It was a great show with you. Even with
Great
our
stuff.
little snafu, I'll go back and see what happened in the middle with the doc. You know, our tribute to the wonderful Dr. Barber, and we'll see what happens with that. Thank you, everybody. Dragon Tail Tarot is with us. Hello, Matt Hunter. Thank you, Poppy. Everybody, my throat's going. I can't do all the names today. Thank you guys for coming, Jennifer. I will be here
Yes.
on Sunday next week. I will be in New
No.
York, and I'm going to that. I'm
Okay.
going to that funeral, and I will be with my family. There will be shows if I have enough time. We will be doing best ofs and things put together, and that's it. Take it
All
away,
right,
Jen. End
Sandy.
up. Give us this departing shot.
Oh, well, you know, I mean, this whole climate crisis continues to evolve and unravel all around us. And we do see bits and pieces of awareness, you know, kind of like popcorn, right? Pop, 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 pop. And yeah, you're right. You know, it's a good sign that Newsweek ran the methane feedbacks articles. Big
Yeah,
step for Newsweek. So, you
yeah,
know, go
it's a
Newsweek.
big step. All right,
You know, and it's a poignant time, you know, with both your cousin and the Arctic
Dr. Barber.
scientist
Yeah,
David Barber, Dr. David
yeah.
Barber. So, you know, it's
Mm,
always good to remember that, you know, life is
precious.
impermanent, precious and impermanent.
And love
And
every day. And try to
yes,
find joy in everything every day, no matter how shitty it could be. Try.
yes.
All right, guys. We are out of here. Peace out.